Welcome to the course Introduction to Programming and today's topic, First Steps on the Command Line. In this video, you can observe how to work with the command line. I will introduce a few fundamental concepts and essential commands. We're also going to look at two ways to make working with the command line much more convenient. Before you meet the basic commands, we should clarify some concepts that are used in connection to those commands. Those concepts are files that allow us to store any kind of data. These files are stored in directories. Directories contain files and other directories. All those directories together create a file hierarchy. A path is a sequence of directory names that we have to follow to get to a file or directory from the start. The current directory is used if no directory is specified, and a prompt indicates that we can enter values, a command, or whatever. You very likely have worked with files already. You write a letter in Word, it's saved in a file. You play a song, the music is stored in a file, and so on. Every file has a name and contains some data. That might be plain text or more complex data, depending on the program with which the file is supposed to be used. Every file is stored in a directory. Directories also have names, but instead of storing data, they contain files and other directories. Their purpose is to allow us to organize the files on our computers and other devices. Almost every directory is itself stored inside another directory, called its parent. The only directory that does not have a parent is called root directory and is written with a single /. All the directories together form a hierarchy which has a tree-like structure. It starts at the root. For any file on our computer, there is a sequence of directories starting at the root that takes us to that file. This is called the path, and its components are directories which are separated from one another by /. Of course, it would be tedious if we had to enter the full path for every file we work with. What helps here is the current directory. This is a path that is used whenever we do not explicitly state a path. So, if my current directory is /home/marco, I could write cp file A, file B instead of the much longer cp/home/marco/file A /home/marco/file B. Or I could write ls instead of ls/home/marco. I will explain these commands in a moment. In other words, there are absolute paths, which are paths that start at the root and list every component to follow, and there are relative paths, which only list the components starting at the current directory. In the above example, /home/marco/file A is an absolute path, and file A is a relative path. The prompt is an indicator telling us that a program is ready for input. In the particular case of the command line, it indicates that we can enter the next command. On the other hand, as long as the command line prompt is not visible, no further commands will be accepted, even though the system might allow us to type something in. One thing you might not be used to from using other operating systems is the rule of silence. It says, when a program has nothing surprising to say, it should say nothing. As a consequence, if you write the command to delete a file, that command deletes the file, no questions asked. After all, you should not be surprised. While this does allow you to work faster once you have become used to it, it might be something to watch out for at the beginning. After these foundations, let's launch the command line. In order to do so, we open the K menu. This is the menu you get by clicking on the K icon in the left of the panel at the bottom of the screen. You can also open the K menu from the keyboard by hitting Alt F1. From the K menu, we can just start typing console, and after a few characters, the system narrows it down to what we are after. Of course, we have to click on it. Next, let's discuss some of the essential commands. The first one will be cd. This is short for change directory. It sets the current directory to a new value. Next up is ls. This is short for list. It lists files and directories. mkdir is short for make directory. It creates a new directory with the given name. If the name we provide does not specify an entire path from the root, called an absolute path, then it's a relative path, which means the current directory is used and the new directory is created within it. If earlier components on the path I give do not yet exist, then mkdir will signal an error and not create the directory. cp is short for copy. With cp, I can copy a file. Again, if the target file exists, it is overwritten without asking. mv is short for move. With this command, I can move or rename a file or directory. Be aware that if I already have a file of the target name, it is overwritten without asking. rm is short for remove. With this command, I can delete files and directories. When deleting files, it will not ask for confirmation. So just when you thought all commands had only 2 letters, here's one that has 3. pwd is short for print working directory, which prints out the current working directory. At first, using the command line might seem to take longer than using some graphical user interface. However, there are lots of keyboard shortcuts that speed up our work at the command line. First, there's the history of commands. Every command I type at the command line and that I actually execute is recorded in that history. To browse through these commands, I can use the arrow up and arrow down keys. I can then just hit enter to execute the exact same command again, or I can edit the command, making some adjustments before I hit enter. This would already be of great help, but the history is even kept across sessions. So the command I entered today will be in the history when I look for it in the future. Commands I entered months ago are in my history today. With this many commands in the history, scrolling through them one by one is not always the most helpful way to access them. Another option is to search for any part of the command I am looking for. This is available using the Ctrl-R keyboard shortcut. For example, I might remember that one file name I used on the command line was f2c.cpp. Hitting Ctrl-R and then typing f2c will show me the most recent command line with f2c in it. Hitting Ctrl-R repeatedly will search through earlier command lines with this sequence in them. Another speedup comes from using file name completion. The keyboard shortcut for this is the Tab key. Here's an example for how it works. Say I have 2 files in the current directory, powderkeg.cpp and pointsongrid.cpp. I enter capital P and hit Tab. This completes to PO. This happens because every file starting with capital P in the directory then continues with a lowercase o. But after the O, we need to choose. If I enter a lowercase I and then the tab key again, the name completes to pointsongrid.cpp. Obviously, this saves lots of typing. The command line allows you to enter, edit, review, and execute commands. Files and directories form a hierarchy in which every file has a path by which it is accessed. The current directory can be used to save having to type long paths. Some fundamental commands allow us to create directories, list their content, and copy, move, rename, and delete files and directories. Ask yourself, do you understand the difference between files and directories? What is used as the components of a path? Which symbol separates the components on a path? Which command would you use to copy or rename or delete a file? What is the keyboard shortcut to scroll through the history of commands? What is the keyboard shortcut to complete a file name? That's it for now. Thanks for watching and have a great time.